Hello, everybody, and welcome to another special edition of the Chi-Town Shoot Wrestling Podcast. Today, I am doing a book review, in fact, of the Last Hart Beating by Nattie Neidhart, and it covers parts 1 and 2. I'll record and review the first half of the book, which covers her dynamic with her family and her father and getting into the business, getting her feet wet and starting. And it ends right before her WWE career completely takes off. And yeah, I wanted to basically go section by section and just give a little bit of my thoughts on the book. So the book actually starts with the Hall of Fame ceremony where Jim the Anvil Neidhart was getting inducted, and Nattie starts off the book with the scene of her and her mother scattering Jim the Anvil Neidhart's ashes in Central Park, and it's a really fascinating way to open up the book. I think that it gives you a nice mix of high drama and emotion. She writes it with a mix of grief and comedy. Of course, you are grieving the loss of your father, but you also have this funny part in this specific part of the book about basically being illegal to scatter ashes right outside the arena. And the Total Divas producers were panicking, and Nattie was, of course, terrified of getting arrested while holding her dad's remains. And I think it sets the perfect tone for the book, because in both parts 1 and 2, and I think as I keep reading the book, it is deeply personal. It feels, like her life can be a little chaotic sometimes. And I feel like it's filled with the dark humor necessary to survive the wrestling business, but also, coping with things like the passing of your father. And yeah, just a really great hook, great way to start the book. In the same section, they go into the actual Hall of Fame incident in 2019. So Nattie was fighting to get her dad, Jim, inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame with the Hart Foundation. She walked up to Vince McMahon and basically asked, and he thought that he was already inducted. Not realizing that he wasn't inducted yet, he basically said, sure, they'll be the first group inducted into the Hall of Fame. This was the incident where a fan tackled Bret Hart during the acceptance speech, and Nattie was protecting her uncle. And there was some interesting insight into the actual incident that took place. She was talking about how she gave a look to Bret Hart and basically thinking like this is her words, she felt like Daddy wanted to make sure that we stole the show in the most Jim Neidhart fashion ever, because her dad was so charismatic and just full of energy. She felt like this was probably the best way to induct him and Bret Hart into the Hall of Fame. And she also, after the Hall of Fame ceremony, she felt, instead of fear, she felt a strange sense of closure as well with the induction ceremony. So moving on, she talks about the Hart Foundation, or the foundation of the family, talking about the Harts and their house, basically kind of breaking down the dynasty aspect. She gives a little bit of background of Stu Hart's origin story. I think in 1946, he had a meeting in Manhattan with promoter Toots Monts, and that kind of changed the family's trajectory from there. Stu's background, and I read Bret Hart's book back in 2008, I think. It was a really great book, and Nattie does a great job as a storyteller. I think that's one thing I couldn't do, is put down the book. And it was kind of hard for me not to finish the whole book, but I did want to split this review into two. So I think she does a really good job just telling the story, and the way that she started the book was proof of that. But in terms of Bret Hart's book and this one, they talk a little bit about Stu Hart. So in this book, she talks about his rise from poverty, basically sleeping outside with dogs for warmth, and, to becoming the legend that we all know Stu Hart and the Dungeon is in wrestling lore. She talks about Helen Hart and the House, and a little bit about how opposites attract, because Stu was a tough, street smart wrestler, and then Helen was more of the educated, well-to-do New Yorker. They bought an old orphanage for $28,000, and it was basically unfixable and broken, but it did become the heart of the family and the business, and that's where the Hart House came from. And she then started talking a little bit about the origin of the Anvil and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and this was where Jim won the Calgary Stampede Anvil Toss. It was, I think, a $500 prize, and basically had a massive throw of, I think it was 11 feet and 2 inches, and that's where he earned his nickname. So it was just very interesting to see the different dynamics between the different family members, all that history. And like I said, I don't remember how much detail Bret Hart went into his family dynamics, but she does a really good job of setting the picture of the Hart family. And following that, she starts talking about the good 80s. She splits this specific section between the good 80s and the bad 90s. So you have this pattern of excess, living large in the era of the 80s. She talks about the spaceship house, the family moving into this massive black and white house that looked like a spaceship, and it kind of represented the peak of the wrestling boom. And she gets very candid when it comes to her father and his addiction and his struggles during these sections of the book. She mentioned Jim running late, but perfectly on time because of mentioning cocaine. That was a big thing used in the 80s, and I think a lot of wrestlers were using it during that time. One of the highlights of this specific section was in 1988, when her father visited her school in full gimmick. He had the spandex, he had the fanny pack, and he tells a room full of children that school doesn't matter because sports paid for me to go to school. And I just thought that was really funny. And I'm kind of curious what the other classmates thought of that. She talked about, she did say that they were very enamored by it. I know the teacher was upset because that's not what you normally tell kids in school. But I'm curious as adults what they thought of Jim the Anvil Neidhart. So she also talks about the brotherhood, or, wrestlers, the boys. She talks about how her house was a revolving door of legends. Mentioned the Iron Sheik, and she gave this funny anecdote about hunting for snakes in the swamp. And she gives this funny part where Brutus the Barber Beefcake was walking around in a tiny Speedo, and mentioning how basically it almost looked like there was nothing there because it was so small. And during this time, she talks about the cracks in the armor. And during the good times, even though they won the tag titles in 1987, I think the girls were playing with the tag titles and they left them out by the pool. And she talks about her dad freaking out and screaming that he was going to get fired, and mentioning how she never saw him like that before. And this kind of moves into the bad 90s. There's a drastic shift in tone starting in 1992. And this is basically around the time where wrestling as a whole wasn't as popular as it was before. She talks about waking up to find the family car, her Dodge Ram Charger, being repossessed. And the industry as a whole was declining. Attendance was down. Hogan wasn't a draw anymore. The money was drying up, and a slew of different legal troubles and wasted chances. There was the U.S. Airways incident with her father, where he was accused of assault and he was acquitted. He won the lawsuit. I think he won $400,000. And this was kind of highlighting his struggles as well, including financial struggles. So he wins the $400,000, and instead of saving the family and saving that money, he basically blew the entire settlement in months. She talks about him buying a Ninja motorcycle and carrying around $225,000 in a bag. Still, spending money like it was the 80s. And the ongoing struggles with Jim, and him and other wrestlers, taking uppers and downers to heal the pain. And she talks about, how his bags would smell like icy hot from matches, taking all those bumps and just trying to sustain himself, because it was such a brutal time being a wrestler, because you're on the road all the time. You barely had any opportunities to recover. You always had to catch another flight. And she talks about how he missed a flight and he refused to take a call from Linda McMahon, and at the time it was more of a family business. So the wife, then wife of Vince McMahon, called and he got fired. And her mother was writing to Vince for help because they were struggling financially. There was no money coming in at this point. It really was like a boom and bust cycle. There was no savings. And she wrote to Vince for help, and Vince's kind of gave like a cold reply. I guess it was in a nice way, but he wasn't willing to give Jim another chance after all the chances that he gave him. And during this time, they basically hit rock bottom. They sold Rolex and boots and other paraphernalia just to survive. Nattie's mom was relying on tunas and crackers and food banks to feed the kids. Nattie also talks about basically almost being like a parent herself as a child, where her dad got in a bar fight, and she was trying to break up the fight to protect her dad. And I think that's where her sense of she talks about being a recovering people pleaser in a lot of interviews. And I feel like those kinds of things and stuff that I also personally identify with, I feel like I can be a people pleaser. And I think, as kids, we also, supported our parents. We've had our own sense of financial struggles, and, other issues that you have with, your dad and mom. So this section kind of like made me identify a lot with her, and just really saw her in a new light. I was just really, I don't know. Yeah, I was just very enamored by it. I think that her struggles just really makes her more of a real person. Sometimes you see just the character on TV, but I think it's great when someone opens up like this. It really just adds another layer to the person. So after that, after the issues that they had financially, they moved back to the Hart House in 1996. And this is where the helplessness and feeling like, you're walking on eggshells, you're not sure how you're going to survive the next day. This is where they become more independent and feel a little better sense of stability. Leaving the anxiety of Florida for the safety of the Hart House. And she jokingly said, even if it smelled like cat pee. And then he started hustling. Her mom was working at a Costco for about $7.50 an hour. Her sister, Jenny, I think it was IGA. Nattie's first job, she was actually 14. She scrubbed toilets and bus tables at Humpty's for, I think, $4.50 an hour. And there was a funny quote about her saying she was rich at that point, R-I-C-H, rich. And it wasn't about the money necessarily. It was about control and ensuring that, nobody was going to take everything we had. She really had to become an adult much younger than most people. And I identify with that too. She also talks about, other tragedies that struck the Hart family. Her sudden death of her cousin Matt, who was 13, died from a flesh-eating disease, necrotizing fasciitis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Owen Hart paid for the funeral and sending Matt's parents to Hawaii to basically take their minds off things. And she also talks about the Kids Wrestling Association, and how his death kind of impacted the Kids Wrestling Association. And then we move on to the origin story with the Mat Rats and TJ. Nattie's entry into the ring was basically defined by her relationship with TJ Wilson and the Mat Rats project. So the Mat Rats was a rave-style wrestling show filmed in a studio. She talks about when she started getting into wrestling, about the Q incident, where she was waiting for TJ to say showtime, but he's speaking gibberish because his lip was split open, and Nattie entered too early in a panic. But despite, the slight hiccup, she hit the Dragon Rana, which was the one move that I think she had in that debut perfectly. And the Mat Rats was going to be a show that Eric Bischoff was interested in. He loved the pilot and he wanted to buy it for WCW, but WWE bought WCW not too long after that, and then it basically killed the project. So they were kind of back to square one. And this is where the romance between her and TJ kind of started blooming. They had a fight, and TJ wrote Nattie a heartfelt letter, saying that his ideal day would be having coffee and donuts. And I think their first kiss happened in a broken down pastel yellow Cadillac. And they moved into a vacant coach house at the Hart House, sleeping on a blow-up mattress with a hole in it. And there was another great quote that she said, when we had nothing else to our names to share, we shared wrestling. And wrestling kept her going. I think that's where her relationship with TJ started. Wrestling was a very important part of her life, and I mean that entire family. And you can tell as she was writing this how important wrestling is to her. Now, before the WWE, she did have to pay her dues and cut her teeth overseas. She talked about the international tours that she started doing as she got into wrestling. She mentioned Tokyo Joe, who was a revered trainer, and he lost his leg in a car accident while working for Stu Hart, and he trained Nattie privately, and I think she was the only woman he ever trained. She talked about the UK tour, and she was wrestling 6 to 8 times a week for about $40 a match, and she learned the physical chess of British wrestling. And then the Japan tour, her dad at this time begged her not to go, just talking about the strong style. And for those of you who don't know, strong style, basically they hit pretty hard. And he talked about how it would break her like it broke him. And a poignant quote that I feel like is also another thread through the book is, nobody in our family has cashed out yet with their money and their health. And I've seen Nattie basically saying on social media too, she used that theme, basically saying we beat the house, saying like a casino, the Harts or the family never beat the house. There was always tragedy, injuries, death. And there's an ongoing theme in the book about beating the house, and she's wanting to prove to her father, to herself, and to the rest of the family that you can beat the house and it's not impossible. She talked about being in the Japan tour, living in a tiny apartment. She saw cockroaches that were the size of a mouse. She felt a sense of loneliness and feeling green, and being in a different country. You don't know too much of the language, just enough to communicate with your partner in the ring, or order food and that kind of stuff. But it's a different culture, and you feel a sense of loneliness because of that difference. She talked about Sumi Sakai, who was her first opponent who protected her, and there was a great quote that she told Nattie about, despite all these cultural differences and stuff, she said, "Tonight we just dance." And I thought that was a great quote. And then we transition from indie wrestling to the WWE machine, and she talks about all the setbacks that she dealt with. Her initial rejection, she was sending tapes to Dr. Tom Pritchard and getting the "nothing for you at this time" letter, and a lot of struggles with body image. She was told that she needed to lose 30 pounds, and she felt like plain old Nattie compared to the models. And man, it just kind of sucks to hear that, because when I first saw her like her indie wrestling, like before 2008, I think it was like 2006 maybe, I saw pictures and stuff. Like I don't know why she felt that way, but I think that era, the Divas era, but I feel like also media in general, there was a lot of focus on image and body image, and people were cruel. People are still cruel, I feel like, in general, especially public figures. There's a lot of cruelty, and it's easy for people to bully people and make comments behind a keyboard. But this concept of divas, and being told that you need to lose 30 pounds, if it affects your body image. So she said, she felt like plain old Nattie compared to the models. So she did end up having a tryout, I believe it was in Georgia. And during the tryout, she cut her own face open on her knee brace during her first match, and basically finished the match covered in blood. And unfortunately, during that tryout, her boyfriend TJ got signed, but Nattie did not. So she had to keep struggling, keep cutting her teeth, keep trying and getting better, until they finally called her back in 2007 with a developmental deal. And they originally offered $750 a week, but then they cut it to $500. And Nattie didn't care. She just wanted in. She just wanted that foot in the door. So then we talk about developmental hell, Deep South, and FCW. And she talks about life in the farm system and basically the culture shock of the Diva era. Because Nattie's a wrestler, and that's something that I just really loved about her when she first debuted in WWE, because she was a wrestler and unique, and I just felt like I feel like she was someone, and Beth Phoenix, that needed a major push. And she won the Divas title and the WWE Women's Championship, and we'll talk about that in the second half of the review. But I just feel like she deserves so much more. And her new Low-Key Legend character, I watched her matches in AAA and her matches on the Indies. I think it was GCW. That character, man, I don't know why they wouldn't just put that on TV. The whole presentation with her entourage, and just walking to the ring in that singlet with the mouth guard. She looked like a badass. So, before I review this, I just want WWE to, know that you have some gold on your hands, and I think that character would do gangbusters. So back in developmental hell, she talks about Deep South and FCW. In Deep South wrestling, she was living in a 500 square foot apartment. And Dr. Tom Pritchard, the person I mentioned earlier, was a key ally during her developmental phase. He said she basically had to be weighed in and be a specific weight because the upper brass wanted a specific number. And he whispered into her, just give me a number, so she wouldn't have to step on the scale and basically, see her weight and also, potentially have issues by not reaching a certain weight for WWE at the time. And I thought that was just very, very great of Tom Pritchard. And again, like that insight into the image that WWE had at the time. And I feel like she was an integral part of the women's revolution, because you could see that someone like that and Beth Phoenix, I mean, they put on great matches and they made it work. And the FCW culture shock, she talked about an incident with Tony Atlas, where he visited FCW and asked for Nattie to stomp on his face. And she talked about how, I guess it was a foot fetish. And just kind of like highlighting, some of the weirdness in the industry and some of the characters that you see in the business. And I think another interesting thing that I don't know if it's been mentioned before, but the Bellas really helped, I think, Nattie with the marketing part. I think Nattie was really good with wrestling, and that's her bread and butter, and she's great at it. And the Bellas, who were also in developmental at the same time as Nattie, helped with like the marketing and just being a character, and these dance-offs and bikini contests and stuff that Nattie had to do, which she said she hated. And I think, most people didn't like. There was always that joke about, oh, here comes, the bathroom break. I mean, like, she made it work, and the Bellas were, I think, an integral part in being great businesswomen and helping with like, faking it till you make it, forcing a smile when you walk out. And she talked about, like just trying to figure out how to look sexy and forcing a smile while walking out. And, at the same time, she was crying in her car after feeling, she felt stupid, ugly, and so out of place is the quote that was in the book. And she talks about how the Bella twins were her cellmates, basically teaching her makeup and fashion, and she taught them wrestling. And yeah, I mean, like, this just kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Just, like WWE was that for a while, and I'm so glad that we're in a place where wrestling is the focus. And just the insight from Nattie's perspective, being that wrestler and having to deal with that. I mean, it was heartbreaking a bit, but it was also very the amount of grit and fortitude and the want to keep pushing forward, and just, I think, having that character about not depending on other people. I think it really that core part of her character really, I think, made her continue and just find her way through this. And she talks about then finding your identity as a star maker, and she talks about this unique value that she can offer in the company, being that star maker, being the leader. And Tom was talking about how the office was high on the Bellas and they needed her to be a leader, and she found satisfaction in guiding the match, being that star maker, making the Bellas look great. And then approaching, the end of the second part of the book, she talks about Vince McMahon's visit and she was a little anxious initially about being recognized as the Anvil's daughter. Of course, the niece of the guy who knocked Vince out, because at the time there was still a little bit of, I want to say bad blood, but I guess some uncomfortableness when it came to, the Montreal Screwjob, the Hart family, and all those connections. And Vince stopped to tell her that he's been hearing very, very good things about you and just to keep working hard. And during this part of the book, she also talks about, it might not be the leading lady, going back to that Star Maker thing like Tori Wilson, but she could be the character actress, the person they call to make the scene work. And I think she is that, she does that, but I also think she could be a star, and is a star. And I would love for them to bring that character, the low-key legend, on WWE television, not just AAA and the indies, but I would love to see that character on TV. And especially like the recent championship win, the Intercontinental Championship match with Maxine. I think that'd be great, a great opportunity for her to feud with her, with that specific character. That'd be awesome. So a little bit, retrospective, like in terms of, CTE. She talked about CTE after, Jim's death. His brain was studied by Dr. Ann McKee, and basically he had stage 3 chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And it kind of reframes those bad 90s stories, the erratic behavior, the rage, the poor decisions. It wasn't just bad behavior. They were symptoms of severe brain trauma. And yeah, I mean, like after that second part, I mean, it was such a great read. It was a quick read because you couldn't put it down. And I can't wait to finish the second half of the book and talk to you guys about it. But yeah, I mean, some of the key themes in the book, the contrast, the way that she wrote the book, the contrast between, the spaceship house and the cockroach-filled apartment, these dualities of, boom and bust, her talk of independence and her driving need to never be dependent on anyone financially again. You see that, from the first page of the book to, the ending of that second half of the book. Just wanting to succeed and not be dependent on anyone financially again. The weight of the Hart name, it opens doors, but it also creates massive pressure. I mean, that was another thing. And Cody Rhodes talks about it. I think she talked about it with him on the podcast. I mean, yes, you are part of a, wrestling royalty, but I mean, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. You don't want to look like a failure or, the one famous wrestler family member who just couldn't make it, that's just a different level of pressure too. And there was another segment that I forgot to mention about, how some of the other up and coming developmental wrestlers were, talking shit about her because of that, and it really, it's just like it's a bullying thing. I feel like a thing that hangs up that some like online fans and do that use to hang over heads of people who are, from famous families where that's the only reason that, they got that way. It's just a different kind of pressure, and just the resilience of her, from cutting her face at a tryout to surviving the Shark Tank of developmental and finding her, unique identity in wrestling, especially during the Divas era. Just a great read. I'm looking forward to finish the book. Looking forward to seeing Nattie in Chicago. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the review, and I hope you'll catch me on the next one. Thanks.